Good morning. Thank you so much for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're concluding our study of David and his wives, the wives of David. We've also mentioned his concubines, and today we'll talk about his daughter Tamar. Um, and we want to talk today about the high price David paid in his life for the problematic nature of his relationships with women. We've seen, we know of David. We think of David and Jonathan, David and Saul, David and the love he had for his son Absalom, even after Absalom tried to kill him. We've seen David act honorably, humbly, respectfully to other men, and David quite clearly says about Jonathan and after Jonathan's death, and to Jonathan when Jonathan was alive, that the most deeply loving relationship of his entire life was his friendship with Jonathan. It doesn't mean that they had a romantic relationship, but when he says your love was more important to me than the love of women, he means that. David does not have um, ongoing healthy relationships with women. He just doesn't. He has moments. We saw David with Abigail, and how he appreciated Abigail intervening, and how he thank God for your wisdom, thank God for your intervention, thank God for you. You have saved me from doing a terrible thing. Thank God for you. And we've seen that. We saw David, the whole Bathsheba episode, which is the worst moment of his life, doing the worst thing that he did in his life. We see him taking the time to and the effort to work to build a relationship with Bathsheba to the point that he gives her comfort and they have a child together after everything that has happened. And that child is Solomon, who becomes king. So we see David at moments. We see David's repentance too, and that repentance being genuine. But we don't see in his life the kinds of relationship with women that he had with men. And we what we see is him treating women so often as objects. His concubines, especially, we started our study like that with Michael, the wife of his youth. He wanted her back not because he loved her, but because he paid for her. And Paltiel, the man the Bible calls her husband, cries all the way to the border. David takes her anyway, and they don't even like each other anymore. It's that's clear. And they had this awful conversation when the Ark of the Covenant is brought back to when it's brought to Jerusalem. And we read that a few days ago. We won't rehash that. I want to use David's handling of what happened to his daughter Tamar to illustrate the high price David paid. Um, God tells David after he repents, and this is in 2 Samuel 12, after he after he sins with Bathsheba and he repents, God says, "You're forgiven, but the sword will never leave your house because you've done this thing. You've blown your family up, and your family is going to stay blown up. I'm not fixing this." Um, and it was. I mean, you just turn the page, and you read what happens. David had lots of wives and concubines and lots of children by different women. Absalom and Tamar are full brother and sister, and Amnon is their half brother. Um, and Amnon is the firstborn son, and I'm sure feels proprietary about the family, especially the women in the family. And he becomes infatuated with his beautiful younger sister. Absalom and Tamar, full brother and sister, are both young people of great physical beauty, we're told. And Amnon becomes infatuated, obsessed with her, and plots to rape her, rapes her, and then puts her back on the street. And when that happens in chapter 13, and David finds out about it, David is angry, but he doesn't do anything about it. He takes no action. His daughter is raped, and he takes no action, none whatsoever. And so it's up to her older brother to do something. And the thing that he does is not necessarily the thing he should have done, but it's the thing that he does, which is he hatches a plot of his own. And he murders his brother Amnon for what he did to his sister. And he takes his sister into his house and she stays with him the rest of her life. And guess what? He names his own daughter after his sister who was violated so that her name would never be forgotten. Absalom himself is not necessarily a good man, although he is a loving brother to his sister. And tries to take over the kingdom. In fact, he plots to curry favor with the people and to run his father out of Jerusalem, which he does. Um, as we read on from chapter 13 to chapter 14, and then we read about at the end of chapter 16 how he took David's concubines that David had left behind and had sex with them on the roof of the palace so that all the people could watch him do it, to disrespect his father. And now, when the battle came between David's forces and Absalom's forces, we read about this um, in chapters 18 and 19. David says, whatever you do, don't kill Absalom. But Absalom gets killed anyway. And then David is left crying for Absalom, his son, weeping at the top of his voice. Oh, my son Absalom, my son, my son. Oh, Absalom, would that I had died instead of you. Oh, Absalom, my son. David has arrived at this moment of absolute despair because of the way he has treated women, because the way he multiplied wives, because the way he didn't respect the mothers of these sons and didn't respect his own daughter when she was violated, because he did not lead as a husband and a father in his home by having respectful, appreciative relationships, proper relationships with his wives and his daughter. He's come to this pass. Two sons are dead because of this. And you know that he knows because he's David. Of course he knows. You know that he knows when he's saying, I wish I had died instead, that he knows it's his fault. That all of this has happened because of him. All of it. You know he knows that. And he doesn't even get comfort in the moment. What he gets is Joab speaking truth to him. Joab says, what is your issue? This, these men have fought and risked their lives to save your neck and your kingdom, and all you can do is cry about the man who was trying to kill them. You better get your act together. Verses 1 through 8. You can read that for yourselves. That's what happens. That's what Joab says to David. The rest of David's life is kind of a chaos. He has been forgiven and his relationship with God is strong. Read Psalm 3, the psalm that he writes when he's fleeing from his son Absalom. And you'll know he's right with God, but there's so much heartache in his life, and there will be for the rest of his life. And why? What's brought it all about? It's his relationship with the women in his life, and how he's not respected and appreciated them and treated them as possessions, not as his son Solomon will write in Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verse 9, as the one person to take joy in as the gift that God has given you as a reward for the life that you live on this earth. That's not what he did. And he had a high price to pay. Okay, well, um, this was not a pleasant study. I'm sorry. Hope it was interesting. We're going to go to the New Testament next and take a little bit of time. Um, and and hopefully we're going to have some ups and downs, but hopefully this will be an enjoyable study. We're going to talk about the life of Peter, but also talk about his brother Andrew as well. And we're going to pick that up next time and take our time doing it. Thank you so much for joining me. Another 5 good minutes with the Word.